She grabbed my arm in the driveway, right there in front of the neighbors, and told me I needed to find somewhere else to stay. My own daughter-in-law. In my own house. And when I drove away that evening, I could hear music already starting inside. Before the week was out, she stood on my back porch with a glass of wine raised and shouted to her guests that the old man was finally gone and they could breathe again. What she didn't know was that I was parked 2 houses down, watching, and I already knew something about her that she thought was buried in another state entirely. I pulled into the driveway that Tuesday evening around 7, later than usual. I'd had coffee with an old colleague from my accounting firm days, a man I'd worked alongside for 22 years before retirement. We'd talked too long, the way you do when you're both past 60 and have nowhere pressing to be. The drive home was quiet, the kind of autumn dark that settles early and makes everything look smaller than it is. My house is a colonial on Pemberton Street. I bought it in 1987 with money I'd saved for 6 years and a mortgage I paid off in 2009, 3 bedrooms, a study I converted from the old sunroom, a backyard with a maple tree I planted the year my son was born. I know every creak in that floor. The lights were on when I pulled up. My son's truck in the driveway, his wife's sedan parked crooked across the grass. They'd moved in 14 months ago. My son had lost his job at the logistics company, and his wife, she went by Renee, though I would later learn that wasn't entirely accurate, had suggested, with great warmth and apparent sincerity, that staying with me for a few months would let them get back on their feet. I said yes. Of course, I said yes. He's my son. I unlocked the front door and noticed immediately that the hallway table was gone. The one my late wife picked out at an estate sale in 1994. Mahogany, carved legs, a small drawer that stuck unless you lifted the handle slightly while pulling. Gone. In its place was a console from one of those flat-pack furniture stores. White laminate. A small decorative cactus on top. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just looking at that space. My son came around the corner from the kitchen, phone in hand. He glanced up, then back at the screen. "Hey, Dad, where's the hallway table?" Renee thought it was too dark. Made the entry feel heavy. We moved it to the garage. I set my keys down on the laminate console. They made a different sound than they used to. "That's my table." He finally looked up. "It's just a table, Dad. The other one looks better here." I walked past him toward the study. My study, where I kept my records, my reference binders, the double monitor setup I'd used to manage my clients' accounts for the last 12 years of my career. I pushed open the door. The room had been repainted. A pale gray that wasn't there last week. My monitors were pushed against the far wall, unplugged. A treadmill stood in the center of the room, still in partial packaging, foam corners leaning against the baseboard. I turned around. My son was in the doorway. "She wants to use it for a home gym," he said. "There's space in the basement for your desk stuff." I looked at him for a long moment. He didn't hold my gaze. "That's my study," I said. "I work in there." "You're retired, Dad." "I still do consulting. I have client files in there. I told you that." He shrugged, one of those half shrugs that meant the conversation was already over for him. "Renee thought the basement would actually be quieter for you. Better for concentrating." Renee thought. I had been hearing that phrase for 14 months. "I'm not moving to the basement," I said, "and I want my table back in the hallway." He said nothing, just looked at his phone again. From deeper in the house, I heard Renee's voice calling his name with that particular tone that meant she needed him immediately and everything else could wait. He left without another word. I stood in the doorway of my painted-over study for a while. The treadmill still had the shipping sticker on the armrail. I noticed it was addressed to my house, delivered while I was out. I hadn't been asked. I hadn't been told. I thought about the table in the garage. I thought about my wife choosing it, haggling with the estate sale woman for 20 minutes, driving home with it sticking out the back of the station wagon. I thought about the mornings I'd set my coffee on it while looking for my keys. Something settled in me that evening. Not anger. Not yet. Just recognition. I went to bed early and lay in the dark listening to them laugh at something on television in the room that used to be my study. The next morning, I came downstairs at 6:30, my usual time. Renee was already in the kitchen. She had rearranged the spice cabinet sometime in the past week, and I couldn't find the coffee filters. She watched me open the third wrong cabinet without saying anything, then finally pointed without looking up from her phone. "Third shelf," she said. I reorganized it. "It makes more sense this way." She was 29 years old, and she was explaining to me where things were in my kitchen. I made the coffee and sat at the table. She was dressed for something, hair done, a jacket I hadn't seen before. Expensive looking. I didn't ask where she was going. She didn't volunteer. After a while, she said without preamble, "Bernard, we need to talk about the sleeping arrangement." I looked up. "Your son and I are trying to have a baby. We need the master bedroom. It's bigger, better light. And honestly, the guest room is really more appropriate for one person." I'd been sleeping in the master bedroom for 31 years. My wife died in that room. I still slept on my side, left side, and left the right side of the bed unoccupied because some things your body just keeps doing. I said nothing. "It would just be more practical," she continued, "and you'd still have your own bathroom downstairs." The downstairs bathroom had a shower head that dripped and a toilet that ran if you didn't hold the handle down for 3 full seconds. I'd been meaning to fix both for 2 years. I set down my coffee cup. "Renee," I said, "this is my house." She looked at me with an expression I can only describe as patient. Like a nurse speaking to someone who keeps forgetting where they are. "We all live here, Bernard. I live here. You're staying here." She tilted her head slightly. The gesture made me feel like I was being evaluated. I think we've all been very generous with each other, and this would just be a small adjustment. "You could think of it as, I'm not moving out of my bedroom," I said. The patience in her face stayed, but her eyes changed. "Okay," she said. She looked at her phone, stood up, picked up her bag, just something to think about. She left without saying goodbye. I sat in the kitchen alone and thought about 14 months of small adjustments. The recliner I came home one day to find replaced by a love seat. The bird feeder in the backyard dismantled because Renee said the seeds attracted mice. The guest room repainted while I was visiting my brother in Cleveland. The color changed from the sage green my wife had chosen to a beige that matched nothing else in the house. 14 months of small adjustments, each one so minor that objecting felt unreasonable, each one building something I hadn't named yet. I spent the afternoon in what remained of my study, working around the treadmill. My client's binders stacked on the floor. My monitors balanced on top of a moving box I'd never unpacked. I was reviewing quarterly figures for a retired surgeon I'd consulted for since 2014 when my son appeared in the doorway. "Dad, we need to talk." He came in and sat on the edge of the treadmill's arm rail, which held his weight, which told me it was a better treadmill than I'd assumed. "Renee's really trying here," he said. "She's made a lot of changes to help this work." "She's made a lot of changes to my house," I said. "That's different." His jaw tightened. "You know what I mean." "I don't, actually." He exhaled. "Look. She's talking about moving out, getting our own place, but we can't afford that yet. And if we leave things like this, strained, it's going to be bad for everyone." I looked at him. He was 41 years old. He had my wife's coloring and my father's habit of avoiding eye contact during difficult conversations. "Then she should stop treating my house like a renovation project," I said. "And the two of you should talk to me before making changes." "That's it. That's all I'm asking." He rubbed his face. "She's just trying to make it feel like a home." "It's already a home. It's already a home. It's been a home since before you were born." He left, and this time the conversation didn't end so much as stop. 2 evenings later, I came home from a walk to find 3 of my wife's paintings removed from the hallway. They were watercolors she had done herself. Landscapes of the lake where we spent our summers in the early years of our marriage. They'd hung in that hallway for 26 years. In their place were framed prints of the kind sold in bulk at home goods stores. abstract shapes and colors that match the new console table. I found the paintings in the garage, leaning against the lawnmower. I brought them back inside. I rehung them myself, hammer and nails, patching the holes the new frames had made. Renee came into the hallway while I was still on the step stool and watched me without speaking. When I climbed down, she said, "Those are really personal, Bernard. A shared space should feel neutral." "They're staying," I said. She left the room. That night, I lay in my bed, the bed I'd bought with my wife the year we moved into this house, and I felt the particular cold of someone who's been patient long enough. I called my friend Dwight the next morning. We'd been friends for 37 years, since we worked at the same accounting firm downtown. He'd retired a few years before me and moved to a house on the east side, close enough to drive to, but far enough that we mostly talked by phone. Dwight listened to the whole thing without interrupting. Then he said, "You know this isn't going to fix itself." "I know. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but something." He was quiet for a moment. "I've got the spare room. You can come here any time. I'm not leaving my house," I said. "No," I said, "any time. Not right now." He paused. "But Bernard, start paying attention. People who act like this don't stop." I thanked him and hung up. He was right, of course. So I started paying attention. I began noticing things I'd let slide past me in the fog of accommodation. Mail addressed to Renee at my address that came from a law firm in Indiana. Not a local firm. Indiana. I didn't open it. But I noted the return address. I noticed that when my son talked about their finances, he referred to their credit cards, their accounts, but whenever Renee talked about finances, she said his name specifically. Your son's savings. Your son's 401k, never ours. I noticed that she made phone calls from the back porch, voice low, and came back inside looking either pleased or tightly controlled. I noticed that she'd begun referring to the house as ours in conversations with the neighbors. I heard her tell Patty from across the street that they were thinking of putting in a sunroom off the kitchen. "We've got the budget for it. It would really add value." A sunroom off my kitchen, adding value to my house. I started doing what I'd done for 40 years as an accountant. I started keeping records. Not evidence of anything specific. Just notes, dates, observations, the kind of careful documentation that looks like nothing until it suddenly looks like everything. The letter from the Indiana law firm bothered me. I waited a week, then searched the firm's name online. Hargrove and Delacroix LLC. Family law and estate planning in Indianapolis. I couldn't tell more than that without knowing what was in the letter, and I wasn't going to open someone else's mail. But Indianapolis. Renee had told us she was from Columbus, Ohio. Had grown up there, gone to college there, moved to this city 8 years ago for a job. Columbus was not Indianapolis. People move. People have lawyers in other states for plenty of reasons. I set it aside, but I filed it. A month after the painting incident, I came home from Dwight's to find a locksmith's van in the driveway. The man was packing up his kit. My son was signing something on a clipboard. "What's going on?" I asked. "Renee wanted new locks," my son said. "The old ones were worn. I hadn't been consulted. I didn't have a new key yet." I stood very still. "Did it occur to either of you to talk to me first? This is my house. My son looked uncomfortable. It just made sense. The locks were old. "I'm on the deed," I said. "My name." "Alone." Did the locksmith ask about that? The locksmith had heard enough. He got in his van with professional speed. My son handed me a key. "Dad, it's just a lock." "It's my house," I said again, and I walked inside. That night I did something I hadn't done in months. I went into my filing cabinet, the old gray one I'd kept in the study since 1991, now wedged between the treadmill and the window, and I pulled out my copy of the deed. My name. The house. Recorded in 1987, updated after I paid it off in 2009. Signed, notarized, filed with the county, my name alone on the title. I photographed it with my phone. Then I called Dwight again. "Here's something people don't tell you about being an accountant for 40 years. You become a very good finder of patterns. You learn that the numbers don't lie, but people do, and that a discrepancy, however small, is either a mistake or a message. You learn to follow the thread before it disappears. I spent the next 3 days at the public library, which had better research databases than my home internet, and also had the advantage of no one in my house knowing I was there. I told my son I had client meetings. I did not have client meetings. I started with what I knew, Renee's full name, which was Renee Louise Paulson, as I'd seen on a piece of her mail once. Her supposed hometown, Columbus, Ohio. Her approximate age, 29. I searched marriage records. Ohio first. Nothing for Renee Louise Paulson in the county court's database. I widened to Indiana, which had been bothering me. Marion County. Indianapolis. There she was. Renee Louise Paulson married Clifton Roy Adderley in Marion County, Indiana, on September 4th, 2016. She was 22 at the time. I sat with that for a while. Then I searched for divorce records. Marion County, Hamilton County, Boone County, every county surrounding Indianapolis. I went to Ohio. I went to neighboring states. I searched for 3 hours. No divorce filing. Not in Indiana. Not in Ohio. Not anywhere I could access. I printed the marriage record and sat with it in my hands. The library was quiet around me. A woman 2 tables over was helping her young son with homework. The afternoon light came through the tall windows at a low angle. Renee Louise Paulson had married my son in October 2020. A small ceremony she'd planned almost entirely herself. She'd said she wasn't close to her family, that they wouldn't be coming, that she'd rather keep it intimate anyway. If there was no divorce from Clifton Roy Adderley, then her marriage to my son wasn't a legal marriage. I searched for Clifton Roy Adderley next. He wasn't hard to find. Facebook profile, mostly public. A man in his mid-30s, construction foreman based in the Indianapolis area. Profile photo of him and a dog in front of a pickup truck. Posts going back years. I scrolled back to 2017, 2018. Posts about a woman who had disappeared, looking for someone if anyone has information. Short, careful post from a man who was clearly not used to asking for help publicly, but had run out of other options. Comments from friends offering sympathy, offering practical suggestions, asking if he tried this or that. The name he used in the posts was Renee. Sometimes Renee Adderley. Sometimes just her. Most recent post, 4 weeks ago, still dealing with the financial fallout. Credit finally stabilized after 7 years. Moving forward feels impossible some days, but I keep trying. I photographed every post with my phone. Then I sat back in the library chair and thought about Renee standing in my kitchen, telling me where the coffee filters were, telling me the hallway table was too dark, telling me shared spaces should feel neutral. I thought about the sunroom she was planning. Adding value, she'd said. Adding value to my house. I typed a message to Clifton Roy Adderley. Wrote it and rewrote it 4 times. Too formal. Too accusatory. Too desperate. I needed to be careful. I needed to be clear and true and give him a reason to respond without giving him reason to dismiss me. Final version. Mr. Adderley, my name is Bernard, and I'm reaching out about a very serious matter. I believe I've located Renee Louise Paulson. She's been living in this area for several years under the name Renee Paulson and is currently married to my son, though I've recently discovered there may be an issue with the legal validity of that marriage, given what I found in Marion County public records. I'm not asking for anything improper. I found you through your public posts, and I believe you deserve to know what I know. If you're willing to speak with me, I can provide documentation. I have your best interests and the truth in mind. Please respond at your earliest convenience. I attached a single photo, the marriage record from Marion County with her full name visible. I put my phone face down on the table and sat in the library until closing time. His reply came the following morning at 6:47, before I was fully awake. I can't tell you what it meant to get this message. I've been looking for 7 years. I have questions. When can we talk? I called him that evening, sitting in my car at Dwight's driveway, which was far enough from my house that I felt I could breathe. Clifton's voice was steady, whatever he'd felt when he got my message. He'd had 24 hours to collect himself. He asked me to explain what I knew from the beginning. I did. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. She told me she was going home to Columbus, he said. Her mother was sick. She was going to be gone for 3 weeks, maybe a month. She'd call every few days. She called twice. Then the calls stopped. By the time I realized she wasn't coming back, her half of our account was empty, and her name was on a small business loan we'd taken out together to expand my operation. How much? I asked. He paused. $43,000. Plus what was in the account. Call it 56 total. That's your money, I said. Her name was on the loan, he said. Joint liability. Except she disappeared, and I spent 2 years dealing with collectors before I got it settled. It cost me my crew. I had to scale down to basically nothing and rebuild. 7 years, I said. 7 years, he confirmed. And all this time she was... He stopped. Married to someone else. Living her life. She's planning to add a sunroom to my house, I said. He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. I'll tell you what I'd like to see, I said. I'd like her to face what she did. Legally. You have grounds to file in Indiana. The marriage was never dissolved. She owes you money documented in court filings. If she has to appear before a judge in Indianapolis. If my son finds out who he actually married. Would you testify? He asked. If it came to that. Willingly, I said. We talked for another hour. At the end, Clifton said, Give me a couple weeks. I want to talk to a lawyer before I do anything, but I'm going to do something. I've been waiting a long time. I drove home and went inside and made dinner while Renee sat at my kitchen table, planning something on her laptop with the screen angled slightly away from the room. She was planning a party? I found this out the following week through Patty across the street, who mentioned it with the mild confusion of someone who isn't sure whether she's supposed to know. Something about a housewarming. Renee had called it that, apparently, to celebrate the house feeling like theirs now. Theirs. I told Dwight that evening. He was quiet for a moment. Then, when? Saturday the 15th. 3 weeks. He shook his head slowly. She's bold. I'll give her that. She doesn't think I'll do anything, I said. Dwight looked at me. Will you? I called Clifton the next day. Have you spoken to a lawyer? Filing the papers this week, he said. Dissolution of marriage. 7 years overdue. And a civil claim for the loan. Plus damages. My attorney thinks we have a strong case. The papers will list her current address. They'll list everywhere we can find her, he said. I'd like you to come to the city, I said. She's hosting a party on the 15th. Saturday evening. I'd like her to be served in person. He was quiet for a moment. At a party? At a party she's throwing to celebrate making my house hers. At my house? I said. Another pause. Then, what time? I told him 8 o'clock. I gave him my address. I told him the front door would be unlocked. Guests coming and going. I told him to find her and simply state who he was and what he was there to deliver. Nothing dramatic. Nothing threatening. Just the truth, in person, finally. There will be witnesses, he said. That's the idea, I said. I spent the 2 weeks that followed being very quiet. I cooked dinners, moved around the house carefully, didn't object to anything. Renee seemed to interpret this as resignation. My son seemed relieved. The treadmill remained in my study. The paintings stayed on the wall, at least, because I'd made that one stand and she'd learned it wasn't worth a fight. I met with an attorney named Calloway, a woman who specialized in real estate and family law downtown, on a Wednesday afternoon. I brought the deed. I brought photographs of the changes made to my house without my consent. I brought a written account of the locked door incident and a note from my son confirming his move-in date. She reviewed everything without expression. This is straightforward, she said. Your property, no lease, no rental agreement. You gave them permission to stay, which they're now exceeding. You can issue a formal notice to vacate with 30 days. If they don't comply, we file for eviction. With this documentation, you'll win. But it takes time, probably 2 to 3 months start to finish. Start the paperwork, I said. She nodded. I'll have the notice ready to send by end of week. I came home that afternoon and started dinner. Renee was on the back porch, phone to her ear, laughing at something. My son was on the couch, watching something on a streaming service on my television with his shoes on my coffee table. Normal evening. Nothing to see. The notice arrived on a Wednesday. I gave it to my attorney to send certified mail. Return receipt requested. Renee signed for it Thursday morning at 10:42. I know because the receipt came back to my attorney's office and she texted me the confirmation. I was at the library when I got the text. That evening, the house was different. Renee's energy changed. Not dramatically, not obviously, but I felt it the way you feel a shift in barometric pressure before rain. My son was quiet at dinner. They exchanged looks I wasn't meant to see. He called me that night when I was already in bed. Dad, what is this notice? It's a legal notice to vacate, I said. You have 30 days. You're joking. I'm not. Over aid, this is insane. You can't evict your own son. The law says otherwise, I said. You've been living here without a lease, without paying rent, for over a year. You've made changes to the property without my consent. When I've objected, you've dismissed me. This situation is no longer workable. He was breathing hard. This is Renee's fault. She's been pushing things. I know that. But throwing us out is not the solution. You have 30 days, I said. He hung up. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. I could hear them talking through the wall. Her voice, sharp and fast. His voice lower, responding. Then a long silence. Outside, the maple tree I planted the year he was born moved in the October wind. Saturday the 15th arrived cold and bright. I'd arranged to spend the afternoon at Dwight's, returning around 7:30 to watch from his sister's house down the block, which she was generous enough to vacate for the evening. Dwight came with me. By 6:30, cars were parking up and down Pemberton Street. I watched from the window. People I didn't recognize carrying bottles, bags, covered dishes. My front porch lit up with strings of lights Renee had bought. My backyard, visible from the side window, was set up with tables. My son's truck was in the driveway. His posture, when I glimpsed him through the window, was stiff. He was playing the part, but something in his body didn't believe in the evening. Renee moved through the rooms visible to me like she owned the place. Because she thought she did, at 7:58, my phone buzzed. Clifton. Parking now. I watched the street. A truck with Indiana plates pulled to the curb half a block down. Clifton got out. He was bigger than his profile picture. Broader, with the particular stillness of someone who's been waiting a very long time and has finally stopped being impatient about it. He crossed the street. Walked up my front path. The door was open. People coming and going. He went inside without hesitation. Dwight was beside me. That him? That's him. We watched. For about 4 minutes, nothing from outside was visible. Then the music dropped. Not off, just down. The kind of sudden volume change that means something's happened inside. Guests started filtering out through the front door. Not rushing. The controlled movement of people who want to leave, but are trying to be polite about it. Couples exchanging quick looks, reaching for their coats. Through the back window, I saw Renee. She was in the kitchen, backed against the far counter. Clifton stood 6 feet away from her, not advancing, just present. My son was between them, one hand raised, talking. Then Renee moved. She pushed past my son toward the back door, the one that opens to the yard. Clifton stepped aside, but didn't follow, just watched. He said something I couldn't hear. She was in heels, and she crossed the yard at a speed that must have hurt. At the back gate, she fumbled. He called out again, clearer this time. The yard carried his voice. You can't leave this one behind, Renee. The court in Indianapolis has your address. The papers are filed. She got the gate open. She went through. My son was in the yard now, following, calling her name. She didn't stop. A car engine started on the side street. Tires. Then silence. My son stood in the yard holding his phone, looking at it. Then he looked up. He scanned the neighboring houses. His gaze moved down the block. I don't know if he saw me. The window was dark and I was standing back from the glass. But he looked in this direction for a long moment. Then he went back inside. Clifton emerged through the front door 15 minutes later. He walked to his truck, sat inside for a moment, then drove away. The remaining guests left quickly after that. By 9 o'clock, Pemberton Street was quiet. My house was lit up and still. Dwight made tea. We sat in the dark of his sister's front room without talking for a while. "You okay?" he finally said. I thought about it honestly. "I'll let you know," I said. My son called the next morning. I answered on the third ring. He didn't speak right away. I could hear him breathing. The particular sound of someone who's been up all night composing what they want to say and still isn't sure. "She's not answering her phone," he said. "She was gone when I woke up. Her things are still here. Most of them, but she took her laptop and the small bag she uses for overnight trips." I said nothing. "Dad, who was that man?" "His name is Clifton Adderley. He and Renee were married in Marion County, Indiana in September of 2016. As far as I can determine, they were never legally divorced." The silence on the line was complete. "Which means," I continued, "that your marriage to her is not legally valid. She committed bigamy when she married you." "That's not—" He stopped. "How do you know this?" "Public records. I spent time at the library. It wasn't hard to find once I started looking for it. The harder question is why none of us lived sooner." He made a sound that wasn't a word. "She left that man with $56,000 in debt and disappeared," I said. "Same pattern. Different city. Different victim." "I'm not a victim," he said. Reflexively. Then, quieter. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't." Another long silence. The kind that fills with everything that's happened between two people and can't be said all at once. "The eviction notice stands," I said. "Not to punish you. Because I can't continue living in my house the way things have been. If and when she comes back, the situation has to change. You understand that?" "Yeah," he said. His voice had gone flat in the way it does when someone is trying not to cry and mostly succeeding. "I get it." We stayed on the phone for another minute without saying anything. Then he said, "I'll figure out where to go." "You have until the 15th, I said. He hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after that. The coffee was ready, but I didn't pour it. Outside, the maple tree was losing its last leaves. My wife had loved October. She'd have hated what these past 14 months had done to the house, and to my son, and to me. The next 3 weeks were quiet in the way that follows something loud. My son moved around the house like a man sorting through damage. Renee called twice. The second time from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer either call. She sent one text, "I can explain all of this. Give me a chance." I didn't respond. Clifton's attorney filed the formal paperwork in Indianapolis. A preliminary hearing was scheduled. He texted me the date with 2 words, "It's real." My son's lawyer, a young man I never met in person, sent a letter arguing that the notice to vacate was retaliatory and that Stewart had established residency rights. My attorney, Ms. Purud Calloway, replied with the deed, the photographic evidence, and a timeline. I didn't hear from his lawyer again after that. The night of November 14th, one day before the deadline, I sat on my own front porch. The street was quiet. Leaves down, yard bare, air sharp enough to see your breath. I had my coffee and my phone and my copy of the deed. Inside, my son was packing. I could hear the tape gun, the careful sounds of boxes being assembled. I didn't go in. The morning of the 15th, he came out while I was still in the kitchen. He had his overnight bag, car keys, the posture of someone trying to look steady. He'd arranged to stay with a friend from work while he looked for a place. He stopped in the kitchen doorway. He looked at the room the way you look at something that used to belong to you. I'm sorry, he said, for not seeing it, for choosing her over you. I didn't mean it to happen that way. I know, I said. I let her make me into someone. He stopped. His jaw worked. I don't know what I became. Someone who let comfort replace judgment, I said. That's not the worst thing a person can be. But it has a cost, he nodded. Looked at his shoes. Looked up. Is there a way back, he asked. Not to what it was. Just. Is there one? I thought about my wife's paintings, back on the wall where they belonged. I thought about the hallway table I brought back from the garage the morning after Renee first left. Ask me that again in a year, I said. Come to dinner. Show me who you're working on becoming. He nodded again. Picked up his bag. At the door he paused. The table's back. I know, I said. I put it there. He left. I heard his truck start, back out, drive away. The sound faded until the street was quiet. I stood at the kitchen window with my coffee, and I looked at my backyard, the maple, the empty chairs still out from the summer, the place where Renee had crossed the grass in a hurry, catching her heel on the uneven flagstone, not looking back. Clifton called that afternoon. The preliminary hearing had gone well. Her attorney had entered an appearance, which meant she was engaging, which meant she wasn't vanishing this time. The court had her address. She couldn't simply disappear into another city and start over. How does it feel? I asked. Like something real, he said. For the first time in 7 years, like there's actually a record of what happened. I understand that, I said. We talked for a while the way you talk to someone who shares a version of the same strange story and knows without explanation what it cost. December came. I moved my desk back into the study. I wheeled the treadmill to the garage myself, which took longer than it should have, and I'm not going to describe the specifics. My monitors went back on the desk. My binders back on the shelves. The room smelled like paint for another week. But by mid-December it smelled like itself again. I had a client meeting there the second Friday of the month. A video call with the retired surgeon I'd consulted for since 2014. He'd noticed I'd been distracted the past few months. I told him things had been settled now. He said good. He said he'd never found anyone else he trusted with his numbers. Some things, I told him, turn out to be worth protecting. There's a particular kind of quiet that a house has when it belongs to only one person, and that person knows it. Not lonely quiet, not empty quiet. The kind that holds 30 years of a life without apology. I felt it that December evening, sitting in my study with the lamp on, and my client files organized, and my wife's landscapes back in the hallway and the maple tree dark and bare outside the window. I had a court date in January for the formal closure on the eviction case, though with the voluntary departure, it was largely administrative. Clifton had a final hearing in Indianapolis in February. My son texted me occasionally. Short messages, careful. How are you, Dad? Got a place of my own, working on things. I replied each time. Briefly. Honestly. One evening, I went to the garage and uncovered the laminate console table, the white one they'd replaced my wife's mahogany table with. I carried it to the curb and left it there. By morning, it was gone. Someone had taken it. I carried the mahogany table back into the hallway. Lifted it carefully at the right angle because the floor's slightly uneven there, and you need to compensate. Set it down. Put my keys on it. Different sound than the laminate. Right sound. I stood in the hallway for a moment and let the house be what it was. Mine. Marked by years, not recently decorated. A little worn in the places that get used. Holding what it held. I went to make dinner. Justice isn't always what you imagine when you're in the middle of wanting it. It doesn't arrive like something cinematic. It arrives like a document from Indianapolis, like the sound of a moving truck backing away from your curb, like the silence after a party that turned out to be for no one. It arrives like the correct sound of your keys on the right table after 14 months of everything being wrong. You stand your ground not because you're certain how it ends, but because some things are yours, and you know it. And finally, you act like you know it. That was enough.